Greetings, and good afternoon, Juneteenth family. Welcome to another weekly edition of our Lunch and Learn.
E is exhaling, having an opportunity to breathe, to rest, to refill yourself and rejuvenate yourself, because no one can pour from an empty cup.
As you evolve and become more of yourself, you begin to attract the people that are there for you.
Amen.
So everything you need is in this space.
You have to learn from your mistakes. Once you make a mistake, sit down, recoup, and then start over. And once you do that, you say, I got that.
See, Juneteenth means to me, I would definitely say empowerment and education.
When I experience it, it's like just coming together and, being a part of something bigger than myself, And
a new start, starting a new chapter, opportunity, new beginnings, all of that good stuff.
All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. My name is Athenia Rodney. I am CEO and founder of Juneteenth NYC, and I am always excited for a Thursday because I am a serial learner. Like, I love to learn. And every time we get to be here on Thursday, I am learning something new from someone who is amazing. And today is no short of having an amazing person joining us on today. She is a longtime friend. I actually met her, and yes, I'm going to tell a story. I actually met her on a marriage retreat to Jamaica. And they had just gotten married, and we were so excited for them when this was like their honeymoon kind of thing. And we had a ball. We had such a blast. Like, we became lifelong friends, and we are friends until this day. And she is watching me do amazing things, and I'm watching her do amazing things through all life's trials and tribulations. She has continued to stay steadfast in her word and who she is and what she does. So let me introduce you to her, my Lunch and Learn family. Her name is Dr. I love saying that, Dr. Cindy Maria Bautista-Thomas. She is a PhD at LCSW. She got a lot of letters behind her name, so she's been doing her thing. And she is an esteemed assistant professor in the Department of Social Work at Lehman College. She's a trailblazer in social work practice, education, and leadership with over 25 years of experience spanning clinical, administrative, and leadership roles. Dr. Bautista-Thomas brings a wealth of knowledge, compassion, and dedication to her work with children, families, and organizations. And that's just on the tippity top of what she does. She has done some other things, and she's going to talk about her business and what she does on that other side. And if not, I'm going to pull it out of her because she does some amazing sessions, and I hope she's going to do one as we're going into the new year. This is just a prime time for us to be connecting. But Dr. Bautista is going to be talking about healing-centered leadership. So I'm really excited to hear and understand a little bit more about what that is. So let's welcome Dr. Cindy Bautista-Thomas to the stage. How you doing, sis?
I'm doing so fantastic and am so happy to be here in community with you and this amazing Lunch and Learn series. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for saying yes and making some time for us. I know you are busy. So we are extremely excited to have you. And to start us off, tell us, I know I give a little background, but tell us a little bit more about who you are.
Yes, so I like to say my name in this way, Doctora Cindy Bautista-Thomas. And I am an Afro-Latina, first generation, by way of Dominican Republic, born and raised in the Boogie Down Bronx. I am a curator of spaces of healing, transformation, and impact. And I am also wife to Winston Thomas Jr., Chef Winston Thomas Jr. And one of my most important roles is the mom of two beautiful young adults, 19 and 22. I can't believe it. And I love supporting people in their journey on thriving. And so that's just a little bit about sort of how I show up in the world.
Wow, I love that. So your journey on thriving. So I'm going to jump right in and just start asking you a couple of questions. Well, first and foremost, because you are a doctor, please share a little bit about why you chose to pursue this career.
Yes, so I am a life learner. I got my bachelor's in social work from SUNY Stony Brook. I got my master's in social work from SUNY Albany. And I knew that at some point along the way, I wanted to pursue a doctorate. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with the doctorate, but I knew I wanted to be a Black Latina with a doctorate. And so the reason why I chose to get my PhD in urban education from the CUNY Graduate Center is because one of my areas of passion and interest is school social work, looking at mental health for children and families, thinking about emotional intelligence, thinking about how we are preparing our young people for tomorrow are areas that I'm really passionate about. So that's why I got my PhD in urban education. And I initially thought that I would get that PhD and expand my business, Velocity Visions Inc. But lo and behold, I didn't know that God had a different plan for me, which is to I'm currently an assistant professor at the Department of Social Work at Lehman College. And I'm the first Dominican American to hold that role.
Come on now.
In a Hispanic serving institution, minority serving institution that has been part of Bronx history for a very long time. So for me to be the first Dominican American assistant professor is huge. So representation matters, research matters. So my area of research interest is looking at ancestral wisdom as it relates to social work and mental health, looking at school social work practices, and of course, looking at wellness and how social work practitioners, particularly practitioners of color, engage in wellness and how we support ourselves while we're supporting others.
So I'm just taking notes. So you see me looking down. There's you saying a whole lot of stuff. That I'm like, okay. So first, I want to jump into emotional intelligence. You talked about what is emotional intelligence. We've been hearing that a lot lately. That is like the EI. Like, what does that really mean?
Okay, so some people know emotional intelligence as social emotional learning. So it is the same thing. In a lot of educational spaces, particularly K through 12, people might hear the term social emotional learning. So I want to share that because some folks have heard SEL and social emotional learning and not necessarily emotional intelligence. So basically what that is, these are concepts that have been researched and curated over the years by so many different scholars, right? And it is the way we look at the relationship with ourselves and the relationship with others. And so they're very specific tenets that folks talk about, train about, have researched about, that helps us to understand. One is an area of self-awareness, like who are you? How are you engaging with your emotions, your feelings? How are you perceiving the world, right? Looking at just self-regulation, right? How are you engaging with the way things affect you, right? Because we know that we can't control people as much as we would want to, right?
and that is for parents and for wives. We can't control our spouses and we cannot control our children. I always tell people the only one you can control is you.
It's right. Which is very important because the truth is that we we know that there's areas of also thinking about, how do you engage with other people, right? How are other people engaging with others? How are you perceiving the world around you? And then how are you managing those relationships, right? So that's like the simple way. There's more specific technical terms to address these various tenets. But the idea is that you're engaging empathy. And when I'm talking about empathy, I'm talking about how are you understanding people and how they're moving in the world, right?
Question. I got a question for you. I'm gonna cut you. So, because one of the things that I am always doing, and I didn't hear you say here, is the reflection part of myself. So there's the how am I engaging with people in the world, but how am I viewing myself, viewing others see me. So like, for example, how do I show up, and is the way that I am showing up in the world the way that I want people to receive me? Because that's the part that I feel like is really challenging, because I might have in my mind, oh yeah, I'm a loving person and I am, I want to big people up and grow them, but my words and my actions to people may not receive it that way. They were like, oh, she's harsh, oh, she has a high standard, and I'm like, no, but that's how I show love. And they're like, oh, but that's not how I receive it. So where does that part fall in the space where I am able to I guess empathize to understand how I am showing up in the world, and if the way that I'm showing up in the world is really how I want to be showing up?
I love that you share that. So that's the piece of, there's the self-awareness, right? Where you're tapping into, how do I even define who I am? Am I able to tap into what my gifts are, my strengths, my areas of growth, right? Am I able to tap into those areas of challenge, the trauma perhaps that has impacted my life, right? Then there's the area of self-management. How am I then navigating that? And that includes reflexivity. That includes healing practices. That includes engaging in communities that support you in thriving. And that's when we move into the social awareness, right? Like, how do you perceive other people is very much related to how you perceive yourself many times, right? And then it's the relationship management. And when people talk about relationship management, they often talk about like, how am I engaging with other people? But I always center the most important conversation being the one that you have with yourself. Because if I think that I'm amazing and awesome, right? And then someone comes to me and then tries to make me feel less than amazing and awesome, the relationship I have with myself will impact how I then engage with how that person is perceiving me, right? And the other way around, I might feel like I'm not great. And there's been times where I felt that way, having all these letters behind my name, right? So I always speak from a place of experience of, depending on how you've experienced the world and your background, trauma has something to do with it. Historical trauma has a lot to do with it. Intergenerational trauma has a lot to do with it, right? How we have relationships with ourselves, with our communities, with our people, however way you define your people to be. It impacts then how you engage with other people and how you may use what they say to influence your actions, thoughts, and behaviors, which is when mental health becomes a challenge for folks.
It's funny. So this year, our theme is really centered around that. One of the things that I've studied and done some research in is in the African American community, the biggest challenge is identity. We are suffering from an identity crisis. There are, individuals, like, there's so many spaces where other cultures are coming here, especially to America, and they have identity. They can come here. We have the Caribbeans, the Latinas. I'm of both And I can identify more with those who are not here in America than I can identify with my African American culture. And I always say that God puts in my spirit things that I need to explore, not just for myself, but to help others explore because others are experiencing the same, right? There is a lack of identity when we're talking about everything negative when we talk about African Americans, when we talk about, and it's built in, it's baked into who we are because of what slavery has done and what slavery is being taught in school. Juneteenth wasn't something that was taught in schools. I had to learn that outside. I learned that from my best friend, and that's a positive. That was the end of slavery. And why isn't that being taught? Why wasn't that something that we can be like, we can hold off on? The other part is about the flags. There's a Juneteenth flag, which a lot of people are not aware of. There is the Pan-African flag, which is the flag that people typically use for to represent Juneteenth, which is the red, black, and green flag. And then there's the American flag, all very relevant, all very prevalent in our identity as individuals. However, they are put up against each other. You have the flags. You have one saying, "Oh, well, I'm not Pan-African. I'm African American." You have a hue. You're melanated. You have definitely have some history in the past. So when you're talking about that, I totally understand. And in when we talk about the Black community and histories of trauma and histories that, people are like, "Oh, just get over it. Oh, just move on." And it's like, I can't just get over it. I can't just move on because there's so many things that are still steeped and built into the systems, all of them, whether it be every system you can think of, that we are still struggling with. So when you said that, that was just something that really stood out to me. You did talk about ancestral wisdom, and I want to understand a little bit more about what your thoughts are on that.
So first of all, to address what you shared, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Joy DeGruy's work of post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so she is an African-American scholar, social worker who has done extensive research and extensive training and development around that area where we have fallen short as a country, right? Really looking how the transatlantic slave, history that we have as a country has not addressed how our mental health has been impacted by it. So I just wanted to share that. And so ancestral wisdom practices, for everyone, they might define it differently. And so because I am a social work educator, right, I work currently with undergraduate students and providing information and training and knowledge on how they're going to engage with their client populations. And many of the theoretical frameworks that we use and concepts are Eurocentrically based, right? And so there are a lot of things that our communities, and I'm talking about our ethnic communities, individuals from various countries, our African brothers and sisters, thinking about the ways of healing that we have engaged in, that many communities have then co-opted and named differently and have monetized on them, right? When I think about, for example, restorative justice practices, for one, those are ways of engaging that have been happening for thousands of years in Native communities, right? In indigenous communities, in African communities. And now we're using these concepts that are extremely valuable, extremely effective in every space we can imagine, in educational spaces, in corporate spaces, right? There are traditions that use aromatherapy, that use plant medicine, for example, that use narrative inquiry, that use, storytelling is a healing practice in many of our communities. Those are just a few samples of ancestral wisdom practices. When you think about when people use things like sage or Palo Santos that have become extremely commercialized and extremely monetized in communities where they weren't initiated. And so those are just a few
Or
examples.
demonized, because I feel like they're now starting to become demonized. Like those are the works of the devil. And I'm like, do you read the Bible? Do you know that in the Bible it talks about all of these different smells and sweet smelling saviors onto God that are on the throne? So
But that, I mean, don't get me into the scholarship mode, but that is the work of the oppressor, right? The work of the oppressor is to dismantle your tools, the tools that provide strength. How did Haiti, the first Black nation, gain independence? What did they do before they went out into to do the magic work that we now know that they're the first Black nation that was able to gain freedom? They had a huddle, a circle, right? That has been extremely demonized, with the voodoo practices and things, right? And so many of us come from communities where we were colonized. So there were practices that our families engaged in that maybe they still do, but they don't really share the details with us for risk of being demonized in other organized traditions, right? And this is not to dismiss religious institutions and practices, because they certainly have their place and strength within communities. And also it's to bring in that we also have all these tools, traditions, and practices that have been passed on for centuries, for thousands of years, that have created strength and opportunities for growth. And so when I say ancestral practices, ancestral wisdom, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. We're going to talk offline a little bit more about this, because I want to see how we can infuse some of what you just shared more into our practices for Juneteenth. Is very important for me to make sure that we're not losing those practices. But at the same time, I also want to better understand them, so that when I am wrought with some of these, this opposition, that I have the right language to use to oppose it and to say, no, you're not going to come for me, because this is what it is. And it's funny because I've been going and doing lives on my coaching with Athenia Rodney page. And the biggest thing that we have been being hit with is confidence. Like, I've been posting and talking about confidence because that is the biggest thing that we are lacking. And it's like you said, it's constantly a hit towards us. So I am very, and I'm actually going to look for some more literature and ask you to share some books or things that I can read about ancestral wisdom. So this conversation will continue. Do know that. I do want to go back to what you were sharing as far as, because you're a teacher of social workers. So what would you say has been some of the big challenges that you've seen in working with social workers to make sure that they are being equitable in their understanding, being able to take the information that they are learning that is not centered around them and or their practices, and to bring it into spaces that it needs to be brought into with our Black and Brown children?
That's a very great question. And so firstly, I would say that one of the biggest challenges is understanding who they are. Right. And I think it always goes back to the relationship that you have with yourself. So many people come into the helping profession, such as social work, because they themselves perhaps experienced challenges growing up. Maybe a social worker supported them. Maybe they had some mental health issues that they grappled with, or a mental health diagnosis that they experienced in their families. Maybe they experienced adverse childhood experiences, right? So the very first thing that I always find to be a challenge is supporting social workers that are in training in identifying who are they what have they experienced in their lives, and what support might they need to make sure that they're engaging in their own healing, so that then they can support others. So that's like number one. Who are you in your positionality? And that's race, class, gender, sexual expression, class, right? All the things, so that they're clear about any implicit biases they might have experienced, any racism that they may have observed growing up, or even experienced themselves, right? So I work with a diverse population of social work students, educators, and in the work that I've done with Velocity Visions, the same, very diverse individuals where they're coming from various race, ethnic backgrounds, and cultural experiences, as well as spiritual perspectives, right? And then there's the understanding about, why are you even getting into this work? Understanding that every community, every individual has strengths. We have this way of engaging sometimes that's deficit based in the world. And so it's helping them to understand the strength-based perspective that everyone, no matter where they find themselves currently, has strengths and has something to contribute to the world, right? And that for some people is tough, particularly if you grew up in a family that had narratives around certain type of people. And particularly when we're in a political climate and a media situation where there's so many voices saying so many different things, that many are false narratives, right, around perspectives. And so it's understanding the strength-based perspective. And then lastly, understanding, like, what is your role in this? Not everyone's role is going to be the same, right? I'm a micro, meso, macro social worker. What does that mean? That means that I love all the things. I also have a clinical practice. I do meso work, so I work with groups. I work with organizations, corporations, nonprofits, educational institutions. I also do one-on-one work with children, do one-on-one work with adults. And so I understand that the reach that God has given me, the gifts that God has given me, are greater than what I initially intended, right? And so, I happen to believe in a higher power. I believe in God. But for other people, it might be something, another language or terminology that they might use in terms of how they are tapping into who they are, the relationship of who they are, and what gifts, talents, and abilities they have within their reach to engage with the world. Some of my students end up being governmental leaders. Some of them are clinicians, and that's their gift. Others are community organizers. Others become educators, researchers. And so it's so important when you have a relationship with yourself that you are clear, that you clear the path. And that's why mindfulness, and I know we're going to talk about that later, is so important. Because if you have too much noise going on, you can't hear and you can't tap into what those gifts, talents, and abilities are, right? And so those are the sort of like a general areas that I would say has been the areas that have been most challenging in terms of being a social work educator, but also infusing it in all the other things that I've been doing.
Love that. So you, and thanks for bringing into the space the work that you are doing with Velocity Vision. So talk to us about what Velocity Vision is. I know I've had the pleasure to experience it in person and virtually. So share a little bit about what you as the co-founder of Velocity Vision is all about.
Absolutely. So Velocity Visions Inc. was started in 2017 as an incorporated company. But for years before that, my co-founder and I, NC Lewis, found ourselves single, divorcee parents. And we're experiencing challenges around that. So we began supporting each other, holding weekly accountability phone calls, creating intentions, goals, and eventually vision boards. Then we started to invite people into our journey and share the things that we had learned about those processes. And eventually in 2017, we started a business, initially only doing vision board workshops with individuals, mostly women. And we have since expanded our work where we work now. We're a minority women business enterprise. We are New York City school vendors. We work with nonprofit organizations, corporate entities, governmental entities, state, federal. We've provided remote workshops, in-person workshops, retreats, curriculum development, group coaching, executive coaching to organizations. And so right now we really focus on 4 pillar areas. And also we've expanded to different arenas depending on the organization's needs. So self-care is an area that for us has been so essential. And so we do have a podcast called Self-Care to Success in 15 minutes or less. They're 15-minute episodes, y'all. So we share of ourselves and we share ways of engaging with self-care that are not ways that usually people talk about. Then we do work around emotional intelligence or social emotional learning with corporations, with executives, with educators, with young people, work with high schoolers, middle schoolers. So we do the work, y'all. And then healing centered practice, where we're looking at how adverse childhood experiences, how trauma has impacted individuals and communities. And then we talk about post-traumatic growth. Like, where do we go from there? What are tools, strategies, and interventions that can be used both in a clinical sense as well as with employees within organizations? And then, of course, we do the very important work of anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, working with organizations, making assessments, supporting them around language, supporting them around communication within individuals at the organization level. And so we love the work that we do. Our foundation is about healing, transformation, and impact. And so we're very clear that no matter what we're talking with organizations about, no matter what we're doing, trainings, retreats, mindfulness is what we incorporate, because we know that there's just so much noise out there, that we help support people in sort of centering themselves, centering who they are so that they can live life successfully. So while people bring us in sometimes to help the productivity of their work environments, we're very clear that yes, they may become better employees, and they do.
Right.
And it's really because they then tap into their personal development. So we're not only interested in them becoming better employees, we want them to live their best lives and live it out loud. And sometimes what that means is that they might make some assessments during our training that where they're currently employed is maybe it is a stepping stone to something else, right? And so we are really excited because something that we started that was really just about us sharing about our healing journey and sharing about how we were able to accomplish great things. We're able to share it with like organizations, institutions, presidents of organizations, CEOs, C-suite staff on just thinking about how do I use journaling, for example. Recently, I did a journaling workshop with an ERG, a Latino ERG, and the whole idea was about how do I tap into my ancestral background in terms of my parenting. Right? When we think about, you'd never think about something like that to be sort of a corporate workshop. But that workshop, if I'm able to tap into some things that are challenging me, that are getting in the way sometimes of me being able to be my full self, then that will enhance everybody, not just the workspace, but people in the personal environment. And so that's the work that we've been doing. We're both workpreneurs, so we both work full time. And so we're very intentional about how we use our time and energy, because we're not a full time organization in the sense that we do other things. And so we were intentional about how we space out our time, our workshops, our retreats, And so people call us sometimes and they're like, are you available next week? But we've been booked and busy, thankfully.
Come
And we're
on.
also, we're very, we love the jobs that we have. We really enjoy our work. And we also enjoy the fact that we get to do these other things with Velocity Visions that we're really proud of.
I love it. Wow. Such a rich organization. Like there's so many things as you talked about that I'm like, yes, like all of it. Like everybody needs all of it. And some people don't even recognize, and especially with the administration that we're about to go into in the next couple of weeks. I see that it's going to be even more prevalent because this was a big tall tale sign that we are still not past a lot of these conversations. A lot of people are like, oh, racism doesn't exist anymore. And it's like, no, it does. Just like sexism does, just like all the other isms still do. And we have still not gone into a space where we are recognizing it. And that's why it still does. Because until we recognize it, we can't make a change in it. And the higher levels are in spaces where they are not recognizing it, and they are the ones that are influencing those that are under them, whether we like it or not. As I have continued to go up my own totem, I've understood more and more about how who I am, what I stand for, is passed down into others, and being very clear and intentional on what those things are. Like customer service is very big for me. Transparency is very big for me. And that's what I look for with my team, what I ask them to practice with me, so that when they get in the world, that they are also practicing those same things with others and who they consider to be their constituents or who they're working with. So that when people come into my space, they know that these are the three things. They know that they're always going to get education, community, and authenticity in my. And that's because that's who I am as an individual. Those are the things that I value in my life and show up in everything. So just thinking about if this is the things that show up in my life, if there were things that were negative that were in that space, how difficult it would be to change that. Because these are things, like you said, that are ancestral. These are things that I grew up with. These are things that my experiences in this world have created for me and why I am the way that I am. And I imagine that those same things are the experiences that were created for these other CEOs of businesses. And that's why it's being pushed down to those who work under them.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. I do want you to talk a little bit about maybe 3 top level mindfulness practices that our community can indulge in during times that they might find themselves in some form of distress.
Excellent. So first I want to share that mindfulness is something that you do for a specific period of time that's intentional. Okay. And so some people confuse it and think that meditation is the only form of mindfulness. And so mindfulness, I'll share 3 practices that I engage in daily that are mindfulness practices. So the very first practice that I engage in is breathing. So for some people, breathing could be a full-on meditation practice that's 30 minutes. Wow. Some days I have 5 minutes, right? And so I like to use free applications on my phone that bring in soundscape sounds. And then I inhale deeply through my nose, allow my belly to fully fill with air as I inhale. And then I hold the breath at the top, right? You hold the breath and then you exhale. And in fact, when I teach classes, I do mindfulness every single class. And I always start with a breathing exercise, and it could just take just a couple of minutes. Like if everyone right now just took a moment Let's all do it together while
Yes.
you're watching the recording.
Come on.
Or so you can inhale. So I'll guide you to inhale for 3 counts,
Okay.
hold for 4, and exhale for 5.
Okay.
And when you exhale, the invitation is that you exhale audibly, right? When you inhale, maybe consider thinking about a way of being that you'd like to incorporate for that day, right? And so it might be organization, it might be focus, okay? And then when you exhale, consider what is it that's not serving you? What is it that you need to release at that moment? And this could be done regularly so that you can build the bounce back factor, right? You don't have to wait for a crisis to do this breathing. And so I invite you at this time to sit up straight wherever you are if you're able to. If you'd rather lie down, you can do that as well. You can place your hands wherever you feel comfortable. You can close your eyes if that helps you to connect to your breath. Understanding that it's okay if running thoughts come to your mind, because that happens. You notice those thoughts and then release them, right? For us, sometimes we think we're not doing mindfulness because that to-do list is running in our head, but you're still doing mindfulness. You notice it and then release it. So mindfulness is also being absent of judgment. And that's really where some of us struggle, because we like to beat ourselves up, okay? So at this time, I invite you to inhale for 1, 2, 3, hold, suspend the breath for 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you see that was just a couple of moments. You can continue it for several times so that you could really engage in the practice. A second mindfulness technique that I use is journaling. So journaling for me is a practice I engage in every single day. You can enjoy writing prompts. I sometimes I Google some writing prompts. I also create a lot of writing prompts. I'm actually creating a guided journal right now of writing prompts called Oh My Gooseness that I'm working on. We do have podcast episodes where we invite you all to do some journaling. So a journaling prompt might be something like, the legacy I want to leave in the world is, right? And then you just continue writing. You set a timer. Maybe I'm going to write for 2 minutes today. Maybe today I'm going to do a 20-minute writing session, right? Sometimes I like to do free writing where whatever comes to mind, I just write that. Because what happens is when you are able to write those thoughts down, you then connect to the subconscious thoughts that don't necessarily come to you as often, depending on what practices you employ. Right? The third mindful practice is finding a place to engage in nature walking, right? I love forest bathing. I am a tree hugger, y'all.
You
And
said
I love
forest
doing that.
bathing?
Forest bathing. It's when you go somewhere where there are tons of trees. And if you can stand the silence, the invitation is that you walk in nature 10 minutes a day. If you could do longer, fantastic. And I invite you to do that without putting in your AirPods and playing your music, but really listening to your thoughts. Inhaling and exhaling through your nose, allowing that deep breathing to really regulate your mind, body, and soul or spirit wellness, depending on how you want to identify that. And so those are 3 areas, very basic, very simple. Some of you that are listening might be living in concrete jungles like New York City. There are plenty of parks in New York City where you can take yourself to and do a brief walk around your neighborhood, right? Or make an intentional time to do some hiking or forest bathing, just even for a few minutes. So those are 3 very simple mindfulness techniques that don't cost a thing. I invite you to listen to my podcast for more ideas on mindfulness and practicing self-care. And I know that you can do it. Some of y'all are thinking, can I even breathe for 2 minutes? You can do it. You can do it.
First of all, that breathing exercise was life, even though it was that one time. I always say that I want to put that into my daily practice, and I don't. So I'm going to write that down on my calendar, because I always say what's on my calendar is what I do. So I'm going to put it on my calendar to do at least once a day, at least, especially in the morning, to kind of set my intentions. I do a moment of setting my intentions for the day, but I would definitely say the devil has been busy in taking me away from my daily practices of what I typically have done. And I would do journaling. I would do reading of a Bible verse or something like that, just so I can set my intentions. And I haven't gotten to do that. My mind is fixed on, oh, what's next for the business? What's next for these individuals? How do I support somebody else? How? And like you said, all of these thoughts start to come into your mind. And I'm like, oh, wait, let me stop. Let me write that down so I don't forget it, so I can at least get it out my mind. But what you said about just journaling and being able to just get it all out, so that I can, like what they say, do a verbal diarrhea, so that I can be clear of mind and just focus on me, like focus on the work that I need to do for me and being in tune. And I love this forest bathing. I've never heard that term before, but I am so with it. And yes, I no longer live in the concrete jungle, but when I did, I definitely took time to go to like Prospect Park or to just walk around. And it was such a difference. And here I'm in Georgia, there's so many parks that have all of these trees, and they have walking trails, and the walking trails go into what appears to be like these darker areas. And I'm like, oh, do I want to go in there? But when I do go into those spaces, I feel so loved. Like I feel like it's so unexplainable. But the thought of the forest bathing is exactly like it hits home. Like when you get into a nice, warm, hot bathtub and you're just able to release and let go of all of your cares and worries into the water. Like that is exactly what I got when you said that forest bathing. I was like, what exactly is that? So yes, I can concur that is something that I want to now start. So I will include that, and I will start listening to some of these your pods to see what other tidbits I can kind of pick up from that. I know time is running. I do want to ask a question about your book, because I know that you have a book out, which I said you're the co-author of School Social Work, a Direct Practice Guide. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what message does that book convey?
Sure. So it's a textbook. Oh. And the powerful activity of engaging in co-authoring a textbook for me was so healing. Wow. I never thought that what I had to say was that important growing up, right? So for me to be asked to be a co-author of a second edition school social work textbook, and to bring in the voice of an Afro-Latina from New York City into this textbook was critical. So it's a textbook that's used for individuals that are interested in school social work, that are taking a class in school social work, where it gives very specific skills on how to work with young people in educational settings. There is a huge part that I was contributed to, which is about culturally responsive counseling, like culturally responsive social work. How are we engaging in our varying intersectionalities in educational settings? How are we disrupting systems of inequity and oppression? Wow. And so while this textbook gives very specific clinical skills, it also brings in perspectives around how to disrupt systems of inequity, oppression, and racism, right? So that those individuals that work with historically marginalized communities could really educate themselves around how can I move forth. We talk about immigrant populations, we talk about migrant populations in the textbook. And so while it was published fall of 2023, a lot of the information is still very relevant in that textbook. So thank you so much for having me.
We have books that have been out since 98 or 86 and considering that to be relevant. So this I first of all, I applaud you because that is amazing, and being able to like really have a stamp and make a systematic change, not just in the people who you're able to touch immediately who are in the classrooms with you, but now across the globe to have people being able to utilize your materials, your books to learn from so that they can make a change. So you, like you were sharing a little bit earlier, are definitely going out into the world and making a change that we want to see in such a great and magnificent way. And so I applaud you for that. And thank you for saying yes to whoever asked you to be the co-author of this book. Because I think that in itself is amazing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, we are coming to the close of our session together. It has been an amazing time. I do have two questions to ask you. One is, what does Juneteenth mean to you? And then the last will be, what takeaways would you like our listeners to walk away with from today's session?
So, like you, I didn't learn about Juneteenth in school at all. And in fact, I didn't really understand and learn about it until I was in my late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I really understood, and it was a mentor, she's like a second mom to me, how she invited me to a Juneteenth event and then helped me understand the history of Juneteenth. And so for me, it's about empowerment. It's about identifying that we're more than our past.
Yeah.
It's identifying that there is so much that the African American community continues to contribute and create, and that in community there is strength.
Yeah.
And so I'm so proud of you and the work that you have put forth. And then, of course, your events that you've had year after year have helped elevate Juneteenth in New York City in ways that it has never been. Right now, it's a national holiday in many institutions, but that wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
So Juneteenth for me is about empowerment. It's about connection. It's about thriving and bringing people together. And the last thing that I would say to walk away with is the importance of curating opportunities to get to know you. You're probably pretty awesome. And you don't take time for you in as much as you make time for others.
Yeah.
And so my invitation is that you engage in regular activities to curate the very important relationship that is that relationship with you.
Awesome. I love that. And I know I said that was the last, but do you have any events or anything that are coming up that individuals might be able to connect with?
Well, I would say I want to invite y'all to join my mailing list, velocityvisionsinc.com, where there we will post any upcoming events. I also am a therapist, and I do have a small private practice for New York State individuals. Unfortunately, I have not expanded to other states as yet. So if you're someone that's seeking therapeutic support, I do take insurance. You can find my profile on Psychology Today. And please take a moment and listen to Self-Care to Success in 15 minutes or less. And we hope that you're blessed with the content that'll help support you thrive and engage in regular self-care practices so that you can be the best self you could possibly be. So thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you with us on today. You have dropped so many jewels, so many amazing things. We've even had some time to do some self-care in this space. So I love that as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to send you backstage, and I will be back there shortly while I close us out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, wow. I don't know how you feel about today's session, but that today's session was definitely amazing. I got notes 2 pages long. I'm also going to follow up, like I shared, about some books that I can read, because I'm always trying to learn more about how to be more in tune with myself, because that in turn allows me to help others who are challenged with that same challenge that I have. I don't take it lightly that God has given me this purpose to be more present for myself, so that I can be present for others. So I thank you all for joining us on today and continuing to be a blessing for us. We look forward to having you with us on our next Thursday session as well. And if you have missed any of our previous Juneteenth Lunch and Learn sessions, please feel free to go through and to watch. We bring some really amazing professionals on this space, just so that we can share and help to expand our mind. Again, my goal is always, how are we changing society to be better? And that's by being better in society. So thank you again. Follow us, JuneteenthNY.com. Also follow us on Instagram, as we are ramping up for Juneteenth this year. We have so many things that we are working on, as far as our vendors, our Black King celebration nominations, and we're also looking for models and designers. So if you fall into any of those categories, we look forward to having you. Thank you again. Bye. Greetings, and good afternoon, Juneteenth family. Welcome to another weekly edition of our Lunch and Learn.
E is exhaling, having an opportunity to breathe, to rest, to refill yourself and rejuvenate yourself, because no one can pour from an empty cup.
As you evolve and become more of yourself, you begin to attract the people that are there for you.
Amen.
So everything you need is in this space.
You have to learn from your mistakes. Once you make a mistake, oops, sit down, recoup, and then start over. And once you do that, you say, I got that.
See, Juneteenth means to me, I would definitely say empowerment and education.
When I experience it, it's like just coming together and, being a part of something bigger than myself, and
A new start, starting a new chapter, opportunity, new beginnings, all of that good stuff.